Hey guys, let's debunk the misconception on suspension. Say that 5 times fast. And this is my favorite subject, so it's going to be something to really show you guys and open up your eyes about suspension. Hopefully you guys enjoy this one. Hey guys, and welcome to another Talking Mods. One of my favorite subjects, there's obviously a lot of subjects when we modify cars, but one of my favorite subjects is suspension. And when I'm going to talk about suspension, I'm going to talk about something that applies to both the off-road, with trucks, Jeeps, and to sports cars and everyday cars. So this concept and what I'm going to talk about is going to basically kind of debunk the main misconception, right? It's what the manufacturers have put into your guys' heads. And when you purchase a car, you get that sports model or whatever, and it's stiffer. And the concept is stiffer is better. No, stiffer is not better, and I'm going to explain that to you guys. Check out Mod Bargains, all your suspension questions, whatever I talk about in this video, we can help you guys out. From the most high-end suspension to the budget level suspension, we can help you guys out and help you guys put it together. So, the misconception, right? Everybody thinks that when you purchase a sports car, it should be stiffer and a race car is going to be super duper stiff. Well, that is false. That is the number one most false thing you can possibly think of. And it's one of the worst ways you can also set up your vehicle. And I'm going to explain that. Why I'm trying to explain this is because it's a very interesting concept of basically comfort. The more comfortable you are with a vehicle, the more comfort you have, the higher the performance will be. I'm not talking about Lexus comfort where it's soft and quiet. I'm talking about more comfortable you are within the car, the higher the performance will be. Okay? So if this was a linear type of graph, some people think that performance goes up and comfort goes down. That's the false. It's comfort and performance both go up, and the more you spend, and I'm not trying to make you spend more, but the more you spend, the more comfortable it will be, and the more performance that you will have. And I'll explain that concept, okay? The number one thing that we all get suspension for, and I understand it, if you're doing it for just this particular reason, is to, take care of the wheel gap. That makes sense. And no one's gonna fault you on that. Most of us do it for the looks, right? Because we wanna take care of that wheel gap. Now, when you get suspension, why not go into getting something that's gonna outperform the current vehicle that you have, right? Whether it's your off-road vehicle or whatever it might be. Now, suspension has continued to evolve over time, right? Shocks are getting better, springs, everything is getting better the way it's made. There's a lot of new technologies that are available. So one concept that I really like to go over is a company called Ohlins. Ohlins is a fantastic suspension company, pretty much top tier. It's what's used in, if you have a motorcycle, you've probably seen it on Ducatis all the time. You've seen it on a Ferrari. But Ohlins is a company that basically wins a lot of the major races out there, and for this particular reason, and it's their philosophy. Their philosophy is to build a suspension that's more comfortable. The more comfortable you are. Now, what does that mean? Now, the more comfortable you are, the more you will drive into, take on that apex of the turn. You'll go dive into it harder and harder and harder. Before the steering wheel will kind of need to you'll kind of need to ease up and correct yourself. The further you go, right? And that's a performance. Well, that's because you're also comfortable with how far the car can go. Now, comfort is an interesting concept, right? Because let's say we're driving on the road, and I'm going to use the example here at Mod Bargains. We have a railroad track right here, actually. So, and for example, and I've done this several times with vehicles, we'll have, one suspension X. I'm not trying to bash anybody. Let's say we have suspension X, and I'll go take it on the road and I'll drive it, right? And when I drive it, I will feel, that there will be feedback, right? Now, when I hit that railroad, what's going to typically happen is it's going to kind of, come up. It's going to, there's going to be some bump steer. It's going to be all over the place, right? Well, not always all over the place, but it depends on the suspension. And suspension X, you can go out there and you hit that bump and the car moves around. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Now, if I took an ohlins one and I put it out there, now I'm taking the same road here and I go over the railroad track and it kind of goes, and you can see I barely even move my arm. I felt that railroad, right? I didn't have to correct myself, and I've gone through that railroad. So I know it exists, I feel it, but I didn't have to correct my suspension, I didn't have to move my hands, I didn't have to move the steering wheel. That's a byproduct of comfort.
That's awesome!
That's a byproduct of now I'm more comfortable and I'm more sure-footed with how I'm going to drive my vehicle. So I'm going to drive further into it. I want to know the imperfections of the road, right? I want to know there's a railroad. I want to be able, if I'm on the track, I want to know that there's a dime on the road, right? In the same concept, now if I'm in a Jeep or a truck, I'm sure if you guys have modified your vehicles, sometimes you get into these Jeeps and it just feels like completely sloppy. You just feel like the suspension's like wobbling around. It feels kind of like this craziness, right? You don't want that. You want some suspension play if you're rock climbing and so forth. But when you're driving on the road, you don't want that suspension to be all over the place that you're correcting constantly. So again, it's the same concept happens in an off-road. Or now if you're in the Baja and you're really taking it in speeds and you're jumping and the truck is jumping and it's making, that there's an elevation change and so forth. Well, you don't want it to be bottoming out, right? So you need that suspension travel. Obviously, when it bottoms out, it creates, you feel that impact and you feel like, okay, this thing's going to fall apart on me. So that's a very critical concept. And you should guys, if you are driving on every day, you guys can figure that out for yourself. A lot of this and how you feel your suspension is going to be about how you sit in your car. So there's a proper way to sit, and we can put up a diagram and you can see how you properly sit, how you hold the wheel. But you shouldn't be sitting there, with as if it's a low rider or one hand up. That's not the right way to be sitting there, because you're not going to feel the suspension. You don't have as much control, and when you don't have that control, that's when you lose control of your vehicle as well. So you got to have all that, and it has to work together. That's just a little bit there on that whole misconception there. Now I want to go into a story and kind of explain it to you guys in terms of what I have seen, and this is kind of a very interesting story. I feel like back in 2009, 2010, there was MFEST in Vegas. It was a big gathering of BMWs, and there was a big event where a lot of these tuner shops brought out their vehicles to race. And one tuner shop at the time was a company that we worked particularly with, was A Performance. That's how I know it so well, and I know the guys who work there. But A Performance was owned by two guys. One you guys probably know, Paul Walker, and the other was Roger Rodas. And they raced all the time. I mean, Paul used to race, Roger used to race, and some of the other guys on that team used to race. They used to race Mustangs and all kinds of other vehicles. Now, they brought out, this was actually Paul's car, so it was an E92 M3. So I did talk in a previous video, we talked about celebrities. We did work a little bit on his car, on some of his cars, him and Roger's. But anyway, the point is that this car came out with not a huge race team. Obviously, they did really well in racing. This car had a Gintani supercharger. It had a OS Geiken differential. But the main thing it had that was different than the others was it had a ohlins system. Now, it wasn't the ohlins Road and Track, which is it's about a $3,000 system. It was a TTX. Now, that's a higher end model. Paul at the time couldn't drive the car. He was out filming. So Jeff was driving. Now, Jeff was out there against Burke, VF Engineering, GT House, and obviously HPF. HPF now, at this time back in 2007, 2008, if you guys have been in the BMW scene, you guys know who HPF is, or did know who HPF is, because they're no longer in business. And these guys used to spend enormous amounts of money, had a lot of backing behind them, and this was their E46 M3, over 700 horsepower, twin turbo, everything's gutted out. It's a full race car. I mean, it is built to be a race car, wide body. I mean, it's got everything on it, right? And it's got a full race team supporting it. So this should be the car to win. At MFEST, everyone's checking it out. They would show up to like other events, MFEST, and this was the car that was the loudest and it was the meanest. And this was the car that was going to win it all because it had the most money spent on it. You know, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't know exactly how much, but for sure, hundreds of thousands of dollars went into that car. That car did not come in first. A Performance came in first. It didn't just come in first, but in lap times, you know, they both had race, HPF had a specialty race car driver. Jeff is no slouch. He's an amazing driver as well. But that car in the hands of a properly, you know, set up car, a car that's balanced, and suspension is about setting up balance. So a car that was in his hands got about 4 seconds faster per lap than the HPF car. Damn! That is mind-blowing. 4 seconds. So, I mean, when you think about that, you know, you can think about Formula One, where the guys are trying to get into the grid and they're fighting for point 1, point 2.
A few corners as they were trading literally blows, but it's Massa who's come out in.
Those kind of, you know, minuscule parts of a second. You know, 4 seconds in a race environment, that's pretty critical, right? You can talk about tires. They had Hankook tires. They had race tires. There's a lot of other things, but, you know, still, that's a big difference there. GT House didn't even come in third. They came in third. HPF came in third. Burke came in actually second. They did really well. So they knew they're full-on race team as well. I think it was Burke. Yeah. Anyway, we could put a link somewhere in there, and you guys could, if you guys want to read about it. It's kind of old information now, but it's some type of information about it. Anyway, my point is suspension has to be balanced. Suspension is what makes a car, you know, as we get into more modern day cars, and these are older cars about 11, 12 years ago, right? Modern day cars have a lot more horsepower. Do we need all that horsepower? No, we can beat a car that has a ton more horsepower on the track, you know, in terms of fun. We can have more fun with it if we have a properly set up car. So if you invest into suspension, what you put into it is what you get out of it. There is budget coilovers, and we'll put a link up. We did a video on that. But if you invest into it, you're going to have more fun. You're going to enjoy it more. You're going to have more comfort, and you can push your car further. Whether it's on the track, whether it's every day, whether you're driving, you're going to enjoy that car further. So take away that misconception that race cars or suspension needs to be stiff. That's not the way it's supposed to be set up. Okay? And one of the concepts, I think I've thrown this around, I'm going to always keep throwing it around, you do get what you pay for. And suspension is, you know, you get what you pay for. Now, there's some companies that you might get a little bit more, but at the end of the day, you do get what you pay for. You know, invest in it because you're going to enjoy it. And hopefully that debunked the misconceptions on suspension. Guys, I want to see your comments. I really do want to hear what you have to say, your experiences, how you set up your cars. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I hope I can interact with you guys. I didn't go into any specific except I talked to ohlins because of you know, their philosophy. But guys, if you haven't already subscribed, it really does help us out. Hitting the like button helps out. And again, we appreciate it, and we're trying to make these videos for you guys. Thanks again, guys.